Welcome to the Wonder Box, your portal to the past where history comes alive. Buckle up, history enthusiasts, because today we are diving headfirst into a period of unprecedented change, an era that reshaped the world as it was known and laid the foundation for everything we see around us now. We're talking about the Industrial Revolution, a time of roaring machines, bustling factories, and transformations so profound they echoed through centuries and continue to shape our lives even today. Imagine a world lit by flickering candlelight, where most people lived in rural villages, their lives dictated by the rhythm of the seasons and the strength of their own two hands. Travel was slow, communication was even slower, and the vast majority of goods were made painstakingly by individual craftspeople. This was the world before the Industrial Revolution, a world that, in a relatively short span of time, would be utterly and irrevocably changed. Think about it. For millennia, human life had been largely agrarian. Farming was the backbone of society, and most people worked the land, generation after generation, in pretty much the same way their ancestors had. Tools were simple: plows pulled by animals, hand looms for weaving cloth, and workshops powered by muscle or water. Cities existed, of course, centers of trade and administration, but they were relatively small compared to the sprawling metropolises we know today. Life expectancy was shorter, infant mortality was high, and opportunities for social mobility were limited for most. Then, something extraordinary happened. Starting in the late 1700s, primarily in Great Britain, a wave of innovation and technological advancement began to sweep across the land, and then the world, like nothing seen before. This wasn't just about new gadgets. It was a fundamental shift in how goods were produced, how people worked, where they lived, and how they interacted with each other and the world around them. This was the dawn of the machine age, the rise of factories, and the beginning of mass production, the Industrial Revolution. But why Britain? Why did this incredible transformation begin on a relatively small island nation? Well, several factors came together to create the perfect breeding ground for industrialization in Britain. First, Britain was blessed with abundant natural resources, crucially coal and iron ore. Coal became the fuel of the Industrial Revolution, powering steam engines and driving machinery, while iron was essential for building those machines, railways, and bridges. These resources were not only plentiful, but also relatively easy to access in Britain. Beyond raw materials, Britain also had a favorable geography. Being an island nation, it had a long coastline, which facilitated trade and transportation, especially as canals and then steamships emerged. Rivers also crisscrossed the land, providing water power for early factories and transportation routes. Political stability was another crucial factor. Unlike many parts of Europe that were embroiled in wars and revolutions during the 18th and 19th centuries, Britain enjoyed a period of relative peace and stability. Its political system, while not fully democratic by modern standards, was more flexible and responsive to the needs of the growing merchant class than many other European nations. Furthermore, Britain had a thriving colonial empire. This empire provided access to raw materials like cotton from India and the Americas and created vast markets for British-manufactured goods. The wealth generated from colonial trade fueled investment in new industries and technologies. Adding fuel to the fire was the agricultural revolution that preceded and ran parallel to the Industrial Revolution. New farming techniques like crop rotation and improved tools led to increased agricultural productivity. This meant that fewer people were needed to work on the land, creating a surplus labor force that migrated to urban centers in search of work in the burgeoning factories. This agricultural revolution also produced more food, supporting a growing population and contributing to a healthier workforce. And let's not forget the spirit of innovation and entrepreneurship that seemed to permeate British society at the time. A culture of scientific inquiry, experimentation, and a willingness to take risks fostered a stream of groundbreaking inventions. People were actively seeking new and better ways to do things, and there was a strong incentive to turn those innovations into profitable businesses. All these factors combined, resources, geography, stability, empire, agricultural revolution, and a culture of innovation, created the perfect storm for the Industrial Revolution to ignite in Britain. The heart of the Industrial Revolution beat in the factories, and those factories were driven by incredible new machines. The textile industry was the first to undergo radical transformation. Think about clothing. Before the Industrial Revolution, making cloth was a slow, laborious process, largely done by hand. Spinning yarn and weaving fabric were time-consuming tasks carried out in homes or small workshops. Then came a series of inventions that revolutionized textile production. The spinning jenny, invented by James Hargreaves in the 1760s, allowed a single worker to spin multiple threads at once, dramatically increasing productivity. Richard Arkwright's water frame, developed shortly after, used water power to automate the spinning process further, producing stronger and finer thread. These machines were initially powered by water mills, leading to the construction of factories near rivers and streams. But it wasn't just spinning that was revolutionized. The power loom, invented by Edmund Cartwright in the 1780s, mechanized the weaving process, allowing for faster and more efficient fabric production. And then there was the cotton gin, invented by Eli Whitney in the United States in 1793. While not invented in Britain, it had a massive impact on the British textile industry. The cotton gin made it much easier to separate cotton fibers from seeds, leading to a boom in cotton production in the American South and a plentiful supply of raw cotton for British textile mills. These inventions in textile machinery, powered by water and later steam, transformed cloth production from a cottage industry to a factory-based system. Factories sprung up, initially along rivers, and later concentrated in towns and cities. They housed rows upon rows of spinning jennies, water frames, and power looms, operated by a workforce that was increasingly drawn from rural areas. But water power had limitations. Factories had to be located near fast-flowing rivers, and water levels could fluctuate, affecting production. This is where the steam engine entered the scene, becoming perhaps the most iconic invention of the Industrial Revolution. Early steam engines, like the one developed by Thomas Newcomen, were inefficient and primarily used to pump water out of mines. However, James Watt, a Scottish inventor, significantly improved the steam engine in the late 1700s. Watt's steam engine was more powerful, more efficient, and could be used to power a wide range of machinery. It became the workhorse of the Industrial Revolution, driving factory machines, powering locomotives, and propelling steamships. The steam engine liberated factories from relying on water power. Factories could now be located anywhere, especially near coal fields, which provided the fuel for the engines. This shift to steam power was a game changer, accelerating industrialization even further. Beyond textiles and steam, advancements in iron production were also critical. Iron was in high demand for machinery, construction, and later for railways. Traditionally, iron was smelted using charcoal, which was becoming increasingly scarce and expensive as forests were depleted. A major breakthrough was the use of coke, a fuel derived from coal, in smelting iron. Abraham Darby pioneered this process in the early 18th century, making iron production cheaper and more efficient. Further innovations like Henry Court's puddling process in the late 1700s improved the quality and workability of iron. These advancements in iron production fueled the growth of industries that relied on iron, such as machine building and construction. The availability of cheaper and stronger iron made it possible to build larger machines, stronger bridges, and eventually, the iron rails that would crisscross the land. The Industrial Revolution wasn't confined to Britain forever. Like a ripple effect, it spread to other parts of the world, transforming societies across Europe and North America. The initial spread was to Western Europe, particularly Belgium, France, and Germany. These countries had several advantages that allowed them to catch up with Britain relatively quickly. They had access to resources like coal and iron, they had established merchant classes, and they were keen to adopt new technologies. However, they often faced challenges in terms of political fragmentation, trade barriers, and sometimes a lack of capital. Nevertheless, by the mid-19th century, industrialization was well underway in these countries, with factories springing up and railways being built. The United States also experienced rapid industrial growth in the 19th century. Blessed with abundant natural resources, a large and growing population, and a spirit of innovation similar to Britain's, The United States industrialized at an astonishing pace, particularly after the Civil War. The textile industry, iron and steel production, and later industries like oil and automobiles fueled American industrial expansion. Technology transfer played a crucial role in the spread of industrialization. British entrepreneurs and skilled workers sometimes moved to other countries, bringing their knowledge and expertise with them. Industrial espionage also occurred, with other nations eager to learn and copy British technologies. Trade also played a vital role, with manufactured goods flowing from industrialized nations to other parts of the world, and raw materials flowing in the opposite direction. Competition between nations also spurred industrialization. Countries saw industrial strength as essential for economic and military power, and they actively promoted industrial development to keep up with or surpass their rivals. However, the spread of industrialization was not uniform. Some regions and countries industrialized much faster than others. Eastern and Southern Europe, for example, industrialized more slowly and remained largely agrarian for much of the 19th century. Similarly, many parts of Asia, Africa, and South America were drawn into the global industrial economy, primarily as suppliers of raw materials and markets for manufactured goods, rather than as industrialized nations themselves. The Industrial Revolution was not just about machines and factories. It profoundly changed society and the way people lived. One of the most dramatic changes was urbanization. As factories sprung up in towns and cities, people migrated from rural areas in search of work. Cities grew at an unprecedented rate, becoming centers of industry, commerce, and population. However, this rapid urbanization often led to overcrowded living conditions, poor sanitation, and a lack of adequate housing. New industrial cities struggled to cope with the influx of people, leading to social problems like poverty, crime, and disease. The factory system itself transformed the nature of work. People moved from working at their own pace in homes or small workshops to working in large factories, often for long hours and under harsh conditions. Factory work was often repetitive, monotonous, and dangerous. Workers faced long hours, low wages, and exposure to hazardous machinery and unhealthy environments. Child labor was also widespread in the early Industrial Revolution. Children were seen as cheap labor and were often employed in factories and mines, enduring grueling work in dangerous conditions. The factory system also led to new forms of social organization and class structure. A new working class emerged, composed of factory workers who relied on wage labor for their livelihoods. A growing middle class also arose, consisting of factory owners, managers, professionals, and merchants. This middle class benefited from the economic growth of the Industrial Revolution and played an increasingly important role in society. Family life and gender roles were also affected by industrialization. Traditional family structures began to change as people moved to cities and worked outside the home. Women and children increasingly entered the workforce, although often in lower-paying and less skilled jobs than men. The Industrial Revolution also had a significant impact on the global economy. It led to increased production of goods, lower prices, and the growth of international trade. It created new wealth and opportunities for some, but also led to increased inequality and exploitation. While the Industrial Revolution brought about significant economic progress and technological advancements, it also came with social costs. The conditions of the working class, the problems of urbanization, and the exploitation of labor led to social unrest and calls for reform. Workers began to organize themselves into unions to fight for better wages, working conditions, and political rights. Social reformers and activists campaigned against child labor, for improved sanitation, and for social welfare programs. The social problems of the Industrial Revolution eventually led to government intervention and legislation to regulate working conditions, protect workers' rights, and address social inequalities. The steam engine's impact wasn't limited to factories. It also revolutionized transportation. Just as steam power transformed manufacturing, it transformed travel by land and water. The steamboat, pioneered by Robert Fulton in the early 19th century, revolutionized river and canal transportation. Steamboats could travel faster and more reliably than sailing ships, and they could navigate upstream against currents. This had a profound impact on trade and transportation, especially in countries with extensive river systems like the United States. But even more transformative was the development of the railway. The first steam locomotives were developed in Britain in the early 19th century, initially for hauling coal in mines. Soon, their potential for passenger and freight transport became apparent. George Stephenson is often credited with developing the first successful steam locomotive for public railway lines. The Stockton and Darlington Railway in England, opened in 1825, was one of the first public railways to use steam locomotives. The railway age took off rapidly in the mid-19th century. Railway lines crisscrossed Britain, Europe, and North America, connecting cities, towns, and industrial centers. Railways provided fast, efficient, and relatively cheap transportation for people and goods. They facilitated the movement of raw materials to factories and finished products to markets, further fueling industrial growth. Railways also transformed travel, making it easier and faster to travel long distances, contributing to increased mobility and communication. However, this unprecedented progress also came at a cost. The Industrial Revolution had significant environmental consequences, many of which we are still grappling with today. The burning of vast quantities of coal to power factories and steam engines led to widespread air pollution. Industrial cities became notorious for their smog and pollution, which had detrimental effects on public health. Industrial processes also generated water pollution, as factories discharged waste into rivers and streams. Deforestation was another environmental problem, driven by the demand for timber for construction and charcoal for iron production. The extraction of raw materials like coal and iron ore also led to landscape alteration and environmental degradation. While the environmental consequences were not fully understood at the time, the Industrial Revolution marked the beginning of large-scale human impact on the environment, setting the stage for the environmental challenges we face in the modern world. The Industrial Revolution, spanning roughly from the late 18th to the mid-19th centuries, was a period of profound and transformative change. It reshaped economies, societies, and the environment, laying the foundations for the modern world. It brought about incredible technological advancements, increased productivity, and created new wealth. It also led to urbanization, new social classes, and significant social and environmental challenges. The legacy of the Industrial Revolution is complex and multifaceted. On the one hand, it ushered in an era of unprecedented progress and prosperity in many parts of the world. It led to higher standards of living, improved healthcare, and increased opportunities for many. On the other hand, it also created inequalities, social problems, and environmental degradation. The challenges and opportunities created by the Industrial Revolution continue to shape our world today. As we grapple with issues like climate change, inequality, and technological disruption, understanding the Industrial Revolution and its long-term consequences is more important than ever. It serves as a powerful reminder of humanity's capacity for innovation and transformation, but also of the importance of considering the social and environmental impacts of progress and the need for responsible and sustainable development. The echoes of the Industrial Revolution are all around us, in the factories that still operate, in the cities we inhabit, in the technologies we use every day, and in the very fabric of our modern world. If you enjoyed this journey into the past and found the story of the Industrial Revolution as fascinating as we do, please give this video a like and subscribe to the Wonderbox for more explorations into the amazing chapters of history. Hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss our next historical adventure. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next Wonderbox.